There's been this perception on the part of many people that the Yetis are white.
Yetis are almost always brown or reddish.
This is the section in our expedition video that a lot of people contacted me on and says, hey, will you highlight this part of the video? I think I see a Bigfoot shape back there.
Okay, I think things are getting a bit squatchy right now. I'm a little nervous to keep walking towards the sound. But this is the way back.
Deep in the backcountry, a new piece of footage has surfaced. Clear enough to raise questions, puzzling enough to unsettle those who've studied it. Experts remain divided, their answers slipping into uncertainty. The figure moves with purpose, caught between shadow and light. And now, the evidence stands on its own, waiting for us to look closer. Deep in the Monongahela National Forest, the crew of Beyond the Trail set out once more in search of answers. The nights here are long, cold, and quiet, the kind of silence where even the smallest sound carries weight. But what they captured on this trip would leave them questioning what exactly shares these woods with them.
Kind of catch it up here, but nothing came through that I've found so far. Review the video at faster replay speeds. So like right there is 32x. Helps us move through video much faster. And if something were to come through, you would see the heat.
At first, it was only the wilderness speaking. Wind, rain, even snowfall on the final morning near Spruce Knob. The team hiked through cliff ridges and stone formations, the vast forest stretching endlessly on both sides. Nothing unusual, just the challenge of weather and the beauty of West Virginia's backcountry.
Views on that side. We're up on the ridge, which means we're going to continue on, find some of these awesome rock formations. A little breezier up here than shielded by the backside of the hill there, but feeling great, feeling good, especially after that cold morning, waking up in the snowfall. This is
But as evening came, their work began in earnest. They linked up with researcher Charles Kimbrough and set a thermal unit high on a ridge, scanning the laurel thickets below. It was a smart setup, a mobile recording station capable of running all night. Yet while the thermal remained quiet, the audio recorders told another story. Around 4 in the morning, a sharp sound cut through the silence. A single knock. Not natural, not random. Crisp, clean. Something deliberate. That's a definite pop, one of the team remarked as they replayed the file. Another compared it to a wood strike. However described, the sound carried intention.
It's around 4 a.m., 4:20, somewhere around that area.
That's interesting.
But I can cut and give you the audio.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I mean, I just listened to it myself, and yeah, you can hear it. You could hear it too, right?
Yeah. It's fantastic sound. Honestly,
I can play it through the speakers.
Yeah, let's see if it might work. Yeah, that's pretty good.
As they studied the spectrogram, faint percussive blips appeared before the loud knock itself, as if something was moving, preparing. It matched, almost eerily, another knock they had captured days earlier over 40 miles away near Dolly Sods. Two separate areas, two nearly identical sounds. Could this be the same presence shadowing their journey? Or was it proof that this behavior, knocking, is part of something much bigger in these mountains?
Upon further review, this knock sound does not appear to be alone. This might be best heard via headphones, but pay attention to these blips that you see here on the spectrogram. There appear to be some kind of percussives or other sounds prior to the loud, very clearly audible knock.
The following day, more subtle knocks were reported. One hiker, sitting near camp, swore he heard a deep wooden strike echo from the ridge.
Today was good.
You guys thought you heard a knock?
Mike might have heard a potential knock.
in that direction, so that's where we started our hike.
Others captured faint but similar sounds on recorders around 1:30 a.m.
But I came kind of looking that way, and I remember I turned to see if anyone else noticed it. And
Nobody else did.
probably not.
And then you had mentioned you possibly got some knocks on your audio recorder.
Yeah, you got. Yeah, I'd like to listen to those actually when you have a
I'd be
chance.
really curious about that. Maybe we can compare them to the one that Charles got. You
Yeah,
said,
that's kinda what I'd like
what
to do.
time were they in the morning? Do you remember?
Late, like between 1:30ish, between like 1:30 and 2 a.m.
When compared side by side, the patterns aligned almost perfectly, too consistent to ignore.
Here's a comparison between the knock captured last night at this location and one of the knocks we captured near Dolly Sods a few nights ago, over 40 miles away.
By nightfall, the group split into teams, moving in opposite directions from camp. Audio recorders were left running. Calls and knocks were exchanged in hopes of stirring a response. The forest remained still, watching, waiting. The truth is, no one saw what made those knocks. No figure appeared in the thermal. No shadows crossed the firelight. But the audio remains. The sharp, undeniable crack in the night. In the words of the team, it was not natural, and so the question lingers. Was it wood on wood? Was it something else entirely? A mouth pop, a signal, a message? Or maybe, just maybe, it was a Sasquatch letting them know they were not alone. What do you think? Was this the sound of Bigfoot in the Monongahela? Or just the forest playing tricks in the dark? The team behind the Canna Creek Bigfoot expedition had already posted their field video when viewers began contacting them. Several followers asked them to highlight a specific section they believed showed a possible Bigfoot figure. Responding to the requests, the team revisited the raw footage, slowed it down, stabilized the image, and zoomed in to give a clearer view. This was more than just a curiosity. Shortly before filming the clip, they had documented what they believed to be compelling physical evidence.
This is the section in our expedition video that a lot of people contacted me on and said, hey, will you highlight this part of the video? I think I see a Bigfoot shape back there. And I think this is the part that they're pointing out. I'm not quite sure, but I took a screenshot and here it is stabilized.
In soft soil near the creek, they found a large footprint measuring 14 inches long and 7 inches wide across the toes.
Weird how the microphone wasn't working here. I don't remember turning it off. Well, anyway, we get down and measure it, and it's right around 14 inches long from the furthest back of the hill and the longest toe. And then the toe splay at the widest distance is right around 7 inches wide.
At the heel, just before it tapered, the print spread a little over 5 inches. The edges were clean, the soil deep enough to hold the impression, and at the front there appeared to be distinct toe marks.
And then down at the heel, just before it starts to taper, it's a little over 5 inches wide. And we didn't find any boot tread in there or anything, and it was really splayed at the top, which a boot or a shoe does not splay out 7 inches.
This was the best defined print of about a half dozen they had located that day. Most of the others were faint, but this one had stepped into perfect conditions for a clear measurement.
Actually, a human footprint is 4 inches wide, and with shoes and boots on, it's about 4.5 inches wide. So 7 inches wide up at the toes, and they did have indentations that looked like toes. Not saying it was Bigfoot. It's just Bigfoot shaped. It's deep. It's wide. And it's 2 inches longer than my boot track.
Near the footprint, they discovered more intriguing finds. A primitive-looking tool lay close to the prints, along with what appeared to be a basic structure. It was impossible to tell whether the object had been shaped or simply eroded by nature. but the proximity to the tracks raised questions. The team speculated aloud. Could a Bigfoot use such a tool for fishing, catching snakes, or digging? Or was it simply left behind by a person who had passed through long ago?
Here's the primitive tool that we found right near the footprints that were going down to the river. And we were trying to figure out what they might use this for, if it's actually, a Bigfoot tool. I mean, are they catching fish with it? Lizards, snakes, mice, squirrels? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. Maybe a person made it and left it here, but we did find Bigfoot tracks nearby. Okay, we're getting to the section that I wanted to highlight.
The video segment that drew so much attention began as the camera zoomed past one of the team members, Jenny, who was hiking ahead near the area where prints had been found. Beyond her, in a patch of shadow, the shape of something dark and upright appeared for a brief moment. Viewers believed it resembled a Bigfoot, broad, humanoid, slightly hunched. In the stabilized half-speed version, what could be the head seemed to jerk slightly to one side before vanishing behind the trees.
Although I'm looking for the clear open footage of Bigfoot and looking for evidence along the way, this is something I normally probably wouldn't make a big deal out of, but viewers that participate and help us get out there, they're asking for this, and so I decided to stabilize it and all of that so you could get a better look at it. I hope you guys enjoy our Bigfoot sightings, researching Bigfoot sighting hotspots across the Rocky Mountains and the Pacific Northwest.
Back at the print site, the team remeasured the impression. Again, it came out at 14 inches long, 7 at the toes, 5 at the heel. There were no visible boot treads or shoe patterns. Human feet, even in boots, rarely splay beyond 4.5 inches at their widest. This print spread 7 inches. Though the footage is not clear proof, the team presented it for transparency. Viewers asked for this, they explained. So we slowed, stabilized, and highlighted it. Canna Creek remains one of their active hotspots in the Rocky Mountains, a place where vocalizations, structures, and tracks continue to be reported. For now, the stabilized clip adds one more puzzle piece to the mystery walking along the creek. High in the Himalayas, where the air is thin and silence seems endless, the shadow of a giant figure lingers in the imagination. The Yeti, called the Abominable Snowman by outsiders, is more than a story here. It is a presence, feared and respected, said to guard the frozen peaks and punish those who trespass without respect. On April 30th, 2019, headlines spread across the world. The Indian Army released photographs of massive tracks pressed deep into snow near the base of Mount Makalu in Nepal. Each print measured 32 inches long and 15 wide, far beyond the stride of any known animal. The discovery reignited questions that have haunted explorers for decades. Were these the steps of a living creature or echoes of a legend?
Bigfoot and Yeti are conflated as possibly just two examples of the same sort of thing. And really nothing could be further from the truth. The descriptions of the creatures based on the eyewitness encounters are quite distinct from one another. But even more fundamentally for me, the footprints differ dramatically, with one having a much more superficial human-like appearance and the other having a divergent big toe looking essentially like a large chimpanzee or gorilla.
Witnesses describe the Yeti as towering 6 to 8 feet tall, with a cone-shaped head and long arms. Despite the popular image of a white-furred beast, locals insist that most are brown or reddish, with only rare golden coats reported in certain regions.
Physical descriptions are very consistent in terms of standing anywhere from 6 to 7 to 8 feet tall, completely covered in hair, and most importantly, walking on its hind legs like a man.
There's been this perception on the part of many people that the Yetis are white.
Yetis are almost always brown or reddish. The difference would be the Banjankri of Nepal. That Yeti is golden.
The snowman image, repeated in Western stories, masks the truth told in Himalayan valleys. The creature blends with rock and forest more than ice. But the Yeti is not just a figure of curiosity. Stories handed down in Nepal and Tibet speak of its violent nature. Unlike the Sasquatch of North America, often described as shy and elusive, the Yeti is feared for brutal aggression. One account tells of a man seized, lifted, and slammed repeatedly to the ground until he died from his injuries. Locals warn that an encounter is not a mystery to marvel at. It is a danger to survive.
There are many stories and accounts of the Yeti being violent, of attacking and killing the local people. In fact, the locals in Nepal and Tibet are very terrified of the Yeti.
Perhaps the most chilling story comes from 1974. A young Sherpa girl, Lakpa Dolma, was herding yaks when she heard a whistle behind her. A towering, hairy figure rushed forward, grabbed her, and hurled her into a freezing river.
The most terrifying Yeti encounters involves a young Sherpa girl named Lakpa Dolma. And in 1974, this young lady was herding some yaks in the Western Himalayas. She claims that she heard a whistling noise behind her and felt the presence of a shadowy creature. And when she turned, she claimed that a hairy, man-like creature hacked her, grabbing her and throwing her into an icy river.
Hours later, she awoke, battered, to find her livestock destroyed. The attacker, she believed, was a Yeti. For her community, the story was not surprising. It was a warning repeated through generations.
She awoke several hours later. All of her cattle were destroyed. She heard something large walking away through the brush. She claimed it was a Yeti.
Evidence, too, reaches back further. In 1951, mountaineer Eric Shipton crossed the Menlung Glacier near Everest. At 19,000 feet, he photographed enormous footprints in the snow, each marked with 5 toes, wide and square, nothing like a bear or man. When published, the images sparked worldwide fascination, feeding what became known as Yeti fever. Expeditions surged into the Himalayas, each hoping for a glimpse of the elusive giant. Locals, though, already understood the Yeti differently. To the Sherpa, it is more than animal. It is a spirit of the mountains, a guardian that strikes when respect is broken. To them, its violence is not random. It is justice. And yet one question remains. How could such a massive being survive among barren peaks, above tree lines, where little grows and prey is scarce? Some suggest it descends like a bear, feeding in the valleys before retreating to high ground. Others wonder if it is something entirely unknown, an undiscovered species, adapted to extremes we cannot yet imagine. Even now, sightings are rare, but they continue. Each track in the snow, each scream carried on the wind, renews the same chilling possibility. The Yeti may not be legend at all. It began as a casual hunt in southeast Texas, but for Jerry Mills it turned into a moment he would never forget. A co-worker had invited him to his deer lease, and before stepping into the woods, casually mentioned there were Bigfoots in the area. Jerry laughed at first, but as they walked in, the sound of wood knocks echoed through the trees. His friend nodded knowingly. "That's a squatch," he said. Moments later, another knock answered from a different direction, then a third.
So we stopped there, and a little bit later we heard a branch crack. It's still tonight. There's no wind. There's nothing moving. It's just all of a sudden the snap of a...
The forest suddenly felt alive with hidden presence. The experience stayed in Jerry's mind, and days later he returned. Hunting alone, he noticed egrets scattered across the water, their white feathers drifting. One bird had been freshly injured, its neck torn. Jerry realized something powerful had just fed there. As he walked, something paced him from the tree line. Every step he took was mirrored.
Because when you find out, with no shadow of a doubt, your disbelieving mind, even though you've seen it, you still can't believe what you've seen.
He finally raised his gun and warned whoever was inside to show themselves. Silence answered back. The pacing only stopped after he turned a corner. Minutes later, his phone rang. His buddy, hunting in another section, claimed the same thing was happening to him. When the two men regrouped, they tracked the area. In damp soil near a ditch, Jerry found a print, wide enough that his size 12 boot could not touch the edges. Water still pooled inside the impression, while the rest of the ground lay dry. It was clear something massive had crossed just moments earlier.
That ain't an owl. It's coming from, there's no trees out there, Mike. It's laying down or something. Well, we walked off, and when we got to this one spot, it stopped. We stood off the edge of his range and smoked a cigarette or two. I said, let's check this out. We walked back that direction as soon as we got past that line of delineation.
That was his first undeniable moment, a realization that something beyond stories was walking the Texas swamps. Jerry's encounters did not end there. On another hunt, he described seeing a juvenile figure dart from the tree line. It moved with startling speed, arms and legs working in a blur. Later that evening, he and his partner saw a towering figure emerge near the road. At least 8 feet tall, it crossed effortlessly in only 2 strides. The impression it left in the soft soil showed deep toes and the ball of its foot pressed into the earth. The power and grace were undeniable.
And there was a little berm on the edge of the road where, dozers come in and push it clean, where she'd come up on a little rise to go back up into the woods. You could see the ball of her foot and her toes where she pushed off and just whoop, looked like she was floating.
Weeks later, Jerry returned again. This time, the discovery came not from the forest, but his own truck. In the thick dust on the rear window, a massive handprint was pressed into the glass. The size, the long thumb, and the clear ridge patterns told him it had leaned close, inspecting. The creature had touched his truck as if testing it. To Jerry, these moments became more than stories. They shaped a lifetime of belief. Nights in the swamp revealed silence where insects stopped chirping, branches breaking in still air, and the sensation of being followed just out of sight. For him, Sasquatch is no myth. It is a neighbor in the woods, ancient and elusive, moving through creeks and bottomlands that few dare to enter. In the swamps of Texas, Jerry Mills found more than a legend. He found a truth that changed how he looked at the forest forever. Deep in the wilds of Northern California, where Bluff Creek carves through the Six Rivers National Forest, a legend was born. This is the Bigfoot capital of the world, where Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin captured their iconic 1967 footage of a towering dark-haired creature striding across a logging road. In 2025, Mike ventured alone to this hallowed ground, camping overnight near the Patterson-Gimlin film site, chasing the truth behind the myth, and shared it on his channel, Mike Wanders. As dusk settled over the rugged logging roads, the air grew heavy with creepy silence and stillness.
Because there's a big unknown. And it also represents our connection to nature that we as a society are only growing further and further apart from. So imagine if there was another hominid species that didn't die off, that wanted to remain hidden, that is relatively intelligent compared to us, but has completely evolved in a different direction.
While talking, he suddenly goes silent, like he probably heard something. He'd grown up captivated by Bigfoot, sparked by that grainy film seen with his dad and brother, its mystery woven into the X-Files' haunting theme. Now, alone in these woods, every rustle carried a question. Was something out there? The forest, vast and untamed, seemed to whisper back, its redwoods stretching endlessly in every direction. He was lost on a crumbling logging road, rocks and fallen trees blocking the path. This was Bigfoot country, where footprints once appeared on fresh-cut roads, baffling loggers in the 1950s. He clutched a piece of firewood for tree knocks, a technique researchers swear by to mimic Sasquatch communication. He scanned for signs. Broken trees snapped high and clean, unlike the splintered chaos of natural falls. 2 trees, barely 100 yards apart, leaned toward the road, their branches unnaturally sharp, as if twisted by immense force. A massive pine cone, bigger than any he'd seen, lay nearby, almost placed with intent.
It's kind of just lying here. Almost like it was placed here. Obviously humans do a lot of work in and out of here. But as you can see right there, cut log. I'm looking up above and there's no real, didn't fall from these trees. These trees are too small.
The silence was deafening. Bluff Creek's hills loomed, alive with the ghosts of stories. Rock throwing, whoops, screams, all hallmarks of a creature said to haunt campsites. The adventurer, no stranger to solo wilderness treks, felt the creeping unease of being truly alone. In broad daylight, 3 sharp whoops echoed from the woods. Not quite an owl, too deliberate for a bird. His pulse quickened. It was noon, yet the sound stopped him cold.
With an owl, I feel like you would continue to hear it hooting, right? It's usually like a continuous thing that goes on for a little bit. Well, this wasn't that.
Okay, I think things are getting a bit squatchy right now. I'm a little nervous to keep walking towards the sound. But this is the way back.
As he trekked deeper, a chill gripped him despite the 90-degree heat. The forest seemed to tighten, the hairs on his neck rising with the unshakable sense of being watched. He swung his camera behind him, half expecting a shadow to loom. The Hoopa Project book he carried described the Patterson-Gimlin creature. 7 feet 3 inches, over 700 pounds, muscles rippling in digitized footage, carrying something in its hand.
I just want to read this paragraph from this book by David Paulides in relation to the Patterson-Gimlin footage, which is the reason why I'm here. Here's what it says. It says the Bigfoot was walking on 2 legs, had very long arms, black hair covering its entire body and face, mosquito bite, and large breasts were visible. Experts have reviewed the footage extensively and guessed the creature was 7 feet 3 inches tall and weighed in excess of 700 pounds.
Experts swore no costume could mimic that fluid, inhuman gait. FBI tested hair samples matched no known animal. Credible witnesses, police, biologists, and mayors reported the same traits worldwide: long arms, dark fur, and a presence that defied explanation. Back at his car after a 6-mile loop, he reflected on the snapped trees, the whoops, the fleeting chill of being followed. Maybe it was just the magic of Bluff Creek, where every sound becomes a Sasquatch call to those who want to believe. But in this endless forest, where an intelligent creature could vanish without a trace, one question lingered like a shadow. If Bigfoot is out there, is it watching you right now?
I am very excited to be in Randall, Washington right now. This weekend is kicking off a Bigfoot-themed event, and there's going to be a lot of vendors here and speakers, and we are going to show you what it looks like here in Washington State when it comes to the Bigfoot scene and how ingrained it is in the culture here.
In the heart of Washington's untamed wilderness, where Highway 12 snakes through the shadow of Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, and Mount Rainier, a primal mystery stirs. The 2025 Randall Sasquatch event drew hundreds to this rugged valley, as seen on Salish Sasquatch. It was a place where the line between myth and reality blurred. Nestled in a triangle known as Bigfoot's domain, the festival hummed with tales of something massive lurking just beyond the tree line.
So I remember watching Finding Bigfoot years ago, and Bobo was on there, and he goes, "Yeah, you gotta really pay attention to that triangle where it's between Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, and Mount Rainier. That's like a sweet spot." Well, here we are, like smack dab in the middle of all of that.
Under a beautiful, clear sky, a local woman was seen recalling a summer night that still haunted her. She and her late husband, lifelong Pacific Northwest natives, sat on their deck when strange calls echoed through the darkness. A deep, guttural howl rose from one ridge, answered by a higher-pitched cry from another. Not an owl, not an elk, nothing they'd ever heard in decades of camping and hunting. It was as if the forest itself was speaking, the voices male and female, trading secrets across the river.
We live between 2 ridges, okay, on the river, okay? And so we heard that sound. Well, then we heard another one on the opposite ridge, but it was female, and that was male. And there was no mistaking the male-female or the different pitch, right? But we just thought it was very, very interesting.
The festival grounds buzzed with similar stories, each one heavier than the last. A state trooper, driving through a fog-choked night from Mineral to Morton, slowed his cruiser to a crawl. By the highway's edge, a figure loomed, over 8 feet tall, dwarfing his 6 feet 4 inches frame. It glanced at him, eyes glinting in the headlights, before vanishing into the timber with a few strides. He'd scoffed at Bigfoot tales before, but that night shook him to his core.
10:30 at night, hit a fog bank at the pass. Could see about 200 feet in front of him, so he was doing about 20 miles an hour. It was really bad. Somebody was walking just next to the white line, so he pulled the car over and got out and walked up. And he's 6'4", and he said whatever it was over 8 feet tall, and he thinks he saw the Sasquatch. Never seen anything like that in his life. Turned, glanced at him, took 4 or 5 steps, and went up in the timber. He came in the bow shop because he doesn't believe in Bigfoot.
Another man, driving near the Brady exit in April 2023, caught sight of something even stranger. A tall, dark shape glided across 4 lanes and the median in seconds, moving with an unnatural grace no human could match. It didn't run, it flowed, covering impossible distances in a heartbeat. He'd seen athletes sprint, but this was no man. The evidence wasn't just tracks. Stories from the 1880s surfaced, tales of gold miners in southwest Oregon terrorized by a blonde-haired beast. It tore apart camps, hurled rocks, and charged men with bone-rattling roars. One miner found a friend dead, his skull crushed by a bloodied stone. Another fired bullets into a creature that shrugged them off like raindrops. The miners fled, leaving behind a ghost town and a lingering dread.
In those years, the miners started seeing a creature that was about 6 to 6.5 feet tall, primarily covered with yellowish blonde hair. These were not passive, just fleeting sightings. These were very aggressive sightings. A couple of the miners came back up on their camp, and one of these creatures was tearing their whole camp apart and charging them and yelling at them, and one of their dogs got killed.
As time went by Randall, the festival took on a new edge. Attendees spoke of rocks splashing into the river beside them, too heavy for any elk to dislodge. Signs posted for campers were torn down by morning. A dead tree toppled nearby, as if snapped by giant hands. The forest seemed alive, watchful. Flashlights pierced the dark, thermal cameras scanned the undergrowth, and the air crackled with the tension of those who'd ventured too close to the unknown. The Milky River, fed by Mount Rainier's glaciers, churned with secrets. Every snapped branch, every distant howl, felt like a warning. This wasn't just a gathering, it was a reckoning with a force that refused to be explained. As the stars burned cold above the valley, one question hung in the air, sharp as a blade. What's really out there, watching from the shadows of Highway 12? In the shadowed hollers of Appalachia, where Georgia's Blue Ridge Mountains meet Kentucky's wild rivers, whispers of the impossible echo through the pines. Let's get on this journey with the video shared by the I Believe in Bigfoot project. David Baccara, curator of the expedition. Bigfoot. The Sasquatch Museum in Blue Ridge, Georgia, traces his obsession back to the 1960s. As a boy in Miami, glued to nightly news amid Vietnam's grim broadcasts, tales of the Florida skunk ape gripped him. Not a mere monkey, but a colossal, man-like brute, faster and fiercer than any gorilla. It clashed with his schoolroom lessons on evolution, sparking a lifelong rift. Either witnesses lied, or science had it wrong.
And I remember I was a news kid. Even when I was a kid, I loved watching the news. I think a lot had to do with the Vietnam War was on TV. And I remember just really being moved by the story of the Vietnam War growing up. So I think that got me into watching the news with my dad. And then I started seeing things appear on the nightly news in Miami about the Florida skunk ape. They were talking about some kind of a huge man-like creature that was much bigger and faster and stronger than an ape or a gorilla.
By 2016, Bakara and his wife had built a 7,000 square foot shrine to the unknown, crammed with footprint casts, hair samples from Russia to China, and life-size replicas that draw 90,000 visitors yearly. Here, amid screaming audio clips and twisted limbs, the primal fear takes shape.
We opened this museum, my wife and I, in 2016. And at that time, I was, in my schooling, I was learning a little bit about anthropology and the theory of evolution. And I kept thinking how those two worlds were colliding hard. And even at that young age, I knew that somebody had to be wrong.
Next, Michael Cook, a Harlan County native and founder of Cook's Cryptid Research, recounts his awakening at 16 on the banks of Martins Fork Lake. Skipping school for a dawn fishing trip, the air crisp in the 50s, he scanned the ridge for elk, newly reintroduced to eastern Kentucky. Rustling stirred, then chaos.
My name is Michael Cook. I've been researching Bigfoot for 20 years.
What got you started with Bigfoot?
Face-to-face encounter.
So tell us about that first encounter.
I skipped school one day, went fishing when I was 16 years old. I found myself on the riverbank at Martins Fork River Dam in Harlan County, Kentucky. Sun was coming up over top of the ridge. Couldn't really see anything on the ridge, but I kept on hearing something move back and forth.
A massive form tumbled end over end down the slope, crashing into the river like a hurled truck. At first, a sodden furball suggested bear. But as it rose, 8 feet tall and 450 pounds of rippling muscle, Cook's world fractured. It waded the creek, snapping sticks like matchsticks, before locking eyes and charging. Heart pounding, Cook fled up the hill, outpacing even his swift friend, convinced it would devour the slower one first.
When it rode into the river, I thought it was a bear, because the only thing I saw was a big ball of hair. And, common sense to somebody who didn't believe in Bigfoot would say that's a bear. So I laid my fishing pole down and readied myself. Just in case it come out on my side, it's not going to be too happy.
20 years on, this encounter fuels his hunts, featured on travel channels, These Woods Are Haunted, where he probes the trauma that lingers like a brand.
Sound like somebody right. Man, this thing was breaking up some big sticks, and I said, I don't know about you, but I'm getting out of here. We took off like our rear ends was on fire, and we run up that hill to get away from it. I outrun him. And usually he can outrun me, but whatever was behind us, it was going to have to eat him before it got to me the way I figured it. That's a true story, too. It's all true, but...
The stories keep on coming. A 9-year-old from 1974 trembles behind a wild rose-choked fence, voice cracking as he demands the rustling shadow reveal itself. Rocks whistle over the barrier, branches whip through. Then it emerges.
I was 9 years old. That happened in 74. I was 9. And whatever, that fence row was growed up in rose bushes, wild rose bushes. That's why they raised fences back in. They had a fence in the middle, but it was wild rose bushes all the way down it. He couldn't get through it, but he was on the other side of the fence. So I said, I told you, you better answer. You're scaring me. I said, I'll go on if you want me to. And then it just started throwing rocks. These rocks started coming over the fence. Whack, woof, wham, broken tree limbs, splat, splat.
9.5 feet of hulking fur, eyes gleaming like saucers, 8 feet off the ground. A guttural "hoo" freezes him. Threats of gunfire barely deter another stone. But the primal terror roots deep, chasing him to his parents' bed for a year.
Then all of a sudden it walked up and I seen this big hairy figure about 9.5 foot tall. I said, man, that's one of them Bigfoot. I read about it in a little old book I got at the library about a Bigfoot. So I was looking at this thing. I said, good God, it's over top the fence. I said, what is that? I said, who are you? And they went, whoa! Like that right there. And they went, I said, okay, I'm warning you, man. I said, you throw another stick at me or a rock, I'm gonna shoot. So I said, I'll scare it to death. So that's what I was thinking. I'll just shoot over its head.
Well, the testimonies don't end there. A father's 45 jams mid-confrontation with glowing eyes in the dogwood thicket, the creature's path carving a mile-wide swath of snapped brush to the river, trees uprooted like weeds, a trail of destruction no bear could forge. Branches hurl like spears.
There was a couple of apple trees that come down. There's one dogwood tree set right down there at the end of the yard. And right up out of the apple trees, he was standing in between the apple trees down there in that little field in that dogwood tree. Whatever it was, but it had great big eyes, and the light was hitting just right in the eyes. The eyes looked to be about that big round, but they were way off the ground. My dad, being the way he was, he seen it, and he turned around and hollered at it, and, told whatever it was needed to step into the light.
The boy, gun trembling, fires blindly through foliage, eliciting a bone-shivering scream that echoes for half a mile. Survivors speak of chills that rise unbidden, goose flesh prickling decades later, as if the howl imprints on the soul. Trauma threads every tale.
It wouldn't move. He said, I'm going to tell you one more time, step in the light. And he threw down with that 45, shot right at it, and that gun jammed. Never jammed ever. In the whole 10 years he carried that gun, never ever had a problem with that gun. That thing turned and just tore a path down through the woods, down through there. The creek was probably good 3/4 of a mile.
Witnesses confess nightmares that grip like claws. A hulking ex-basketballer reduced to tears, unable to recount his brush without sobs.
I talk to witnesses and they tell me I still have nightmares over this. I know a particular guy who's probably 6'7". He's humongous. He used to play basketball in college, big, strong man. And he still cannot tell you his story, his encounter, without crying.
One man, 5 feet 11 inches, and staring up at an 8-foot sentinel just 20 feet away, freezes in primal paralysis. It poses on the ridge, head bowed in what seems shame, before clenching fists and unleashing screams that summon chills even in retelling.
Froze. I couldn't move, I couldn't run, and I decided to stay there and watch and see what it does. At the time, it didn't even know I was there. It started to turn and walk up the hill, and when it did, it stopped. And then it looked down at the ground and raised its head up and looked back over its shoulder at me. And then it squared up, and it was standing right on the ridge, and it was just standing there posed. And it would look down and look back up at me, and at times it was almost like it was embarrassed that it actually got caught. It was ashamed of itself.
It makes your bones shiver, he whispers, skin crawling on camera. The rawest wound comes forward later.
That's how bad this thing is. That's how mean it is. This thing, when it hollers, it make you creep out. I mean, look at them chill bumps right there. I don't know if you can see that or not. Look at that. Look at that right there. That ain't no fake right there. Look. When you hear that thing holler, it sends chills down. You're just talking about it, it sends chills. Ask people about it. Do you get chill bumps when you talk about this thing? If you've seen one, yes, you will.
In January 2024 interview with Carolyn Allen, 5 or 6 dogs, German shepherds and coonhounds, vanish from an 8-foot pen, undamaged. Inside, necks twisted backward like the deer photo she nods to, bodies drained pale, puncture wounds suggesting something fed without spilling a drop. No screams, no mess, laid gently where they stood, as if mercy killed by a predator that sustains on essence alone.
It's like it had maybe broke their necks. There was no blood or nothing, but it's hard to describe. I mean, they were looking backwards over their back.
Yeah, just like that picture I showed you. The head was behind it.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned something to me when we talked before about a puncture wound, like maybe it had drank their blood.
Yeah.
Strangest thing you ever seen, her father Larry muttered, haunted by the precision. These voices, gathered like storm clouds, form a chorus too uniform to dismiss. Strong fear, unblinking eyes, paths of ruin. In Mosaic law, 2 or 3 testimonies seal fate. Here, Dozens converge on the same shadow. Yet belief remains a solid trek through the underbrush. As Harlan County's ridges loom under October skies, one question claws at the mist. What primal terror waits in your own backyard? Deep in the heart of North Carolina lies the Uwharrie National Forest, a place where the pines grow thick, the nights turn pitch black, and the silence can feel heavier than the trees themselves. It's here, in this rugged, secluded wilderness, that Mike begins his latest journey, determined to uncover the truth about one of the most mysterious creatures on Earth, Bigfoot. The forest seems peaceful at first, the Baden Lake campground quiet under a blanket of stars. But Mike isn't here for peace. He's here to meet men with stories that could change the way we look at these woods forever.
Mike within the shadow of Big Red Eye here. Welcome to the Uwharrie National Forest. Might as well have some fun while we're out here. But anyways, all seriousness, or all jokingness aside, we're here for a serious reason. We're here for some library presentations, but we also got two witnesses coming at you that have been from the Uwharrie National Forest here.
The first is Lee Woods, a North Carolina investigator who has spent years studying the Uwharrie. As the fire crackles in the cool night air, Lee begins to tell Mike about a night back in 2010. A night he says he'll never forget. It was around 10:30 at night, Lee recalls, pointing toward the campsite where it all began. We were sitting right here by the fire, me, my son, Kenneth, and another guy named David. Then we heard it. Just one heavy wood knock.
It was me and my son and Kenneth and a guy named David. And we were sitting right here, and it was around 10:30 at night. Had the fire going, and nothing's changed. This spot looks just like it did then. Nothing's changed. And about 10:30, back over in that direction, which would be campsite number 5. It's right around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
We hear just one heavy wood knock.
In Bigfoot research, wood knocks are often considered a form of communication, warnings, signals, or even territorial displays. For Lee, this one sound was the beginning of a night he still thinks about over a decade later. Moments later, Lee started walking back toward his truck. That's when everything changed. It was like I hit a wall, he says, his voice steady but serious. Like something just told me to stop.
My truck was sitting down here. My truck was sitting right there in number 10, where that picnic bench is at.
Okay.
And when I got right about between them two trees right there, it was almost just like I hit a wall. I mean, literally, it's like something just said, stop.
I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it, like something was out there, watching me. For anyone who has spent time deep in the woods, that primal sensation, the feeling of being hunted, is unmistakable.
As I was standing there, I knew I could feel there was something out here. I could just feel it. So Ken hollered down here to me because I'd been standing here for about a minute and it was pitch black. And a lot of people don't understand. When I say you can't see your hand in front of your face down here some nights, I mean, you can't even see the tree. It's pitch black. I couldn't even see you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm standing here.
Lee stood frozen in the darkness, unable to shake the sense that something was just beyond the tree line. He eventually retrieved his night vision and returned to the fire, but the uneasiness never left. Then his son Joe, standing with a parabolic microphone, suddenly stiffened. He motioned for Lee to come closer. When I put the headset on, I didn't hear anything at first, Lee explains. But then I heard it. Breathing. Deep, heavy breathing, like something was struggling to catch its breath. It sounded just like a bear. That's what I thought it was at first, but it wasn't a bear.
He's standing here with a parabolic dish. He's standing like right here. And about probably 15 minutes later, he's standing right here and he said, come here. So I come back over here, put it back in my ear, and just as soon as I put it back in my ear, straight ahead, right down through there, I hear, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And dude, he went, you hear that? And I said, yeah.
Yeah.
First thing went through my head again, bear. And I thought, oh my God, there is a bear down there. That's what I heard.
Minutes later, Ken caught something on his night vision. A figure standing near a large tree just beyond the campsite. Lee grabbed his own device, adjusted the focus, and there it was. A massive figure, towering, motionless, just watching them. The head was way up there, Lee says, holding his hand far above his own head to show the height. And then I saw it move. First behind the tree, then out the other side, back and forth, watching us the whole time. What struck Lee the most was not just the size of the creature, but the intelligence in its movements. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't rushing us. She was observing, leaning out slowly, showing a little more of herself each time, like she was letting us know she was there. Lee and Ken watched the creature for nearly half an hour. At one point, the figure turned slightly, and that's when they knew.
So I looked at the night vision, and just as soon as I picked that night vision up, she was there, and then I stood there and looked at her for maybe 20 or 30 seconds. And she went back behind the tree, and then she went to the other side. She leaned up on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Then she came back to this side, and she was going from one side to the other, leaning out. But every time she leaned out, you see just a little bit more.
You could see it was a female, Lee says. You could see her whole upper body, clear as day through the night vision. She was massive, thick shoulders, cone-shaped head, arms hanging low. And those eyes, they glowed green in the night vision. They were as big as the lens of a camera.
She came out, and she turned like this right here. She turned real slow. And that's when we could see it was a female, because you could see the breast.
Right.
And you could see the eyeballs. That was one thing that I noticed right off the bat. Because through my night vision, it was kind of a greenish gray look. So her eye was showing up green, and her eye was as big around as that lens right there on your camera. And that's the God's honest truth at that distance.
Wow.
Then, as suddenly as it began, the encounter was over. The figure walked slowly out of sight, disappearing into the thick foliage. And almost immediately, 2 loud wood knocks echoed from the nearby forest, as if signaling her safe departure. For Lee, the night confirmed what he had always believed. These creatures are real, intelligent, and never alone.
Right back down to number 5. 2 hits on a wood knock.
Oh, wow.
It was like they were letting them know she was leaving the area. And the one thing that I've told people, and I'll say it again, the one thing that I will never forget is the way that it looked and the way that it moved.
Where there's one, there's two. Where there's two, there's three, he says. They travel together. They watch us just as much as we watch them.
And what was weird about that was I've always told people, where there's one, there's two, where there's two, there's three, and that is a fact. They never are alone.
From Uwharrie, Mike continues west to Asheville, another hot spot for strange activity. The Blue Ridge Mountains loom like silent sentinels, their misty slopes hiding countless secrets. But if Lee's story proves anything, it's that those secrets aren't staying hidden forever. This journey through North Carolina blends witness testimony, on-site investigation, and raw, unfiltered encounters. A reminder that some mysteries are closer than we think, waiting for those brave enough to step into the dark and look for answers. Footage. Courtesy. Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization. Some encounters leave you questioning what you saw. Others stay burned into memory so clearly you can't dismiss them. For Lori, a quiet Kentucky road became the setting for two moments that changed how she saw the world. The first happened when she was 16, barely old enough to drive. It was dusk on Salt Rock Road. The sky still held light, but the headlights of her car hadn't yet been switched on. As she rounded a curve, something stepped off the road and disappeared down the embankment. A flash, a shape, broad, upright, and gone. She told her grandmother she'd seen Bigfoot. They told her she'd seen a deer, but she knew the difference. It was bigger, taller, not the backside of any animal she knew. Reluctantly, she let her uncle convince her it was an elk. Yet even then, something inside her whispered, it wasn't.
And I thought, I just saw Bigfoot. So I go back to my grandma's house and I tell them, I'm like, I just saw Bigfoot. And they're like, no, Lori, you saw a deer step off the road. I was like, no. This was way bigger than a deer. This was not a deer's backside stepping off the road. Like this was something much bigger.
Years passed. Lori moved on. But one night about 12 years ago, the road brought it back. She was driving on Highway 89 North toward McKee, her daughter in the passenger seat. It was dark now, headlights cutting through curves. As she came around one bend, her lights caught a figure on the far side of a poplar tree. This time, it didn't run. It stood upright, huge but not massive, slender. Its long arms nearly reached its knees. The fur was gray, flat against the body, not fluffy like a dog. In that moment, she slammed on the brakes. Her daughter froze. Lori's heart pounded. She had known since she was 16 she'd seen something. Now it was standing there, still as stone. She shouted to her daughter, "Do you see it? Can you see it?" But her daughter saw nothing. In a panic, Lori put the truck in reverse, trying to get another glimpse. As the red glow of her taillights swept across the figure, its eyes seemed to flash red. She didn't think it was supernatural, just the reflection of brake lights. But it never moved. It didn't run. It didn't even flinch at the sound of her loud truck.
And this thing, it had to be at least 8 foot tall. It was huge because the branch that was down, I was like, oh my gosh, its head was almost to the branch. And I was like standing beside this tree when I went. But there was a deer path. But this wasn't a deer. I mean, that's not what this was. But as far as like giving you like facial features or anything like that, all I know is I seen something big and hairy on 2 feet.
Her daughter locked the door and began crying, begging her not to back up further. "It's on my side," she screamed. Lori stopped. Fear outweighed curiosity. They drove on to her sister's house, shaken. Later, her father grabbed a rifle and went to the spot. Nothing remained. In daylight, Lori returned to the tree. The branch where its head had been came nearly 8 feet off the ground. A deer path ran nearby. But this wasn't a deer. It wasn't built like the sketches of bulky Bigfoot she'd seen. It was mallee gray, slender, more like the wood devils whispered about in New Jersey folklore. 2 encounters, years apart. One flash at dusk, one silent figure at night. Both left the same question hanging. What exactly stands watching from the trees, tall enough to brush the branches and bold enough to never run? In the quiet hills of Hocking County, Ohio, folks like Michael Kane know that Sasquatch might be closer to home than you'd ever guess. He shares his experience as seen on Small Town Monsters. Michael moved there in 2018, and immediately, strange things began happening on his 750-acre wooded property. He'd spot glowing lights in the trees at night, thinking lost hikers were out there. But no one ever showed up. Then came the sounds, tree knocks echoing across the pond, followed by mouth pops like a cork pulling, and then a metallic bonk from an old homestead roof. It happened in patterns, like creatures were talking to each other, surrounding him. "You're always kind of surrounded," Michael says.
You know, it starts to really wear on you. I've sit and listened long enough. It's not just knocks. There is a pattern to it. Almost seems like there is a call and response that I've been able to listen to over the years and be like, well.
He'd hear car crash, loud impacts, but nothing was damaged. Activity picked up in hot, muggy summers, with rocks rapping on windows or things slamming the cabin. One night, his headlamp caught red eye shine from something tall behind a pine tree, oval eyes blinking before it slipped away.
Up the ravine there's, these eyes look like this. They look like oval shape, about this far apart, and staring at me. And I'm just looking, and you can see because of the eye shine, it looks away, looks back at me, blinks, looks away again, and something just moves off.
Neighbors shared tales too. A woman saw a hairy ape man as a teen in nearby Clear Creek Metro Park, thinking it was a wild caveman. Another hunter braked hard when a huge hairy thing crossed his truck's path. These backyard brushes aren't rare. In 1985, near Cleveland in Lorain County, a woman heard her dogs barking wildly. She stepped out and saw a big reddish-brown creature with long arms bolting toward a creek. Later, she found footprints and slip marks in the mud. Homes lose their safe feel when Sasquatch lurks. Pets vanish, trash cans get raided, and there are easy calories for a hungry beast. In Michigan, a researcher blasted whale calls to lure one closer, only to have it mimic back and slap house siding. Motion lights and cameras scared it off.
We tried to wood knock. We actually used whale calls, and then we were able to create, I couldn't, but these guys were sound guys, and they were able to create infrasound that was with whale calls. So you'd blast these whale calls out into the woods with infrasound. We couldn't hear it, but they could detect it, and just to see if it would create any activity.
Another Michigander, recovering from surgery, heard rocks pinging his window 2 nights running. His big guard dog turned scared, crawling into his lap. "We didn't want to look out," he recalls. Curiosity seems to drive them. A young couple in a remote farmhouse heard woman-like screams from the hollow. One dusk, something tall and black passed their window, vibrating the barbed wire fence. It was way taller than a man. Nights later, when their baby cried, the house shook near the crib. In Kentucky's Stanton, a witness tried wood knocks on his parents' deck and got replies back, branches shaking and footsteps pacing 50 feet away. "They're watchers," folks say, peeking over fences at families, especially kids. On a Michigan trail near Rennie Lake, a woman out walking alone in 2023 heard a twig snap. She turned to see a dark humanoid shape rise fast on 2 legs, arms pumping like a runner, then vanish into the woods. It was about her height, 5 feet 5 inches, maybe a juvenile. Wood knocks followed as she hurried back, phone battery dying. Where there's one, there's more, she thought, now wary of solo hikes. Kids face terror, too.
Or very dark brown. I saw it rise up on 2 legs, and in the same motion that it very quickly stood up, it turned and it disappeared into the area, the forest behind it. When I say it was fast, it was super fast. I mean, this happened so quick, like my mind almost couldn't keep up with registering what was happening. A little bit taller than me. I'm 5'5". It turned. The thing that sticks out in my mind is the position of what it would have been its right arm was at like a right angle.
In 1978, in Newberry, Ohio, 2 brothers, 8 and 10, met a 6.5-foot hairy creature eye to eye in snowy woods. It fled super fast, but heavy footsteps stalked their house that night. In Hillsdale County, a couple watched deer spook from their window, then saw a tall, dark-furred thing amble across a field, bending to forage. Skunky smells and howls followed. Jay Cortland, driving a taxi in Mason County, Michigan, in 2018, spotted glowing yellow eyes on a rural road at 2 a.m. Slowing to 20 miles per hour, he and his passengers saw a thin, 8 to 9 foot creature with grayish-white hair blowing in the wind, golf ball-sized eyes, and flat nostrils.
I was driving, actually a taxi that night, and I was picking up a girl that closed a little tavern in the town of Fountain, Michigan, and I had picked her up several times, and we always took the same route down Fountain Road, and that's how we got to her house to take her home.
It stood by a tree, ready to cross, looking intelligent and peaceful. No hostility, Jay says. They talked for 15 minutes after that, agreeing it was either an animal or a costume. These stories shake folks, Some sell homes, change routines, and sleep with guns. But Sasquatch seems more curious than cruel, living alongside us, probing for food, or just watching. If they wanted harm, they'd have done it ages ago. Home's still our castle, but the woods hold secrets that make you wonder what's really out there. The footage remains, unchanged and unclaimed, just frames on a screen, yet carrying weight beyond explanation. Experts can debate, but the images speak for themselves. Was it chance, illusion, or proof of something still walking among us? For now, the mystery holds. And like the forests it came from, it waits, silent and unresolved.